I meant by saying we're a privileged community. In many ways, we have the privilege of sitting in a conference center talking about our issues. We have the privilege of being communities that have access to power, access to wealth, access to one another that can collectively come together. There are communities that are still denied this very thing. There are still communities that still can't afford to do this very thing. And so our job is not just to advocate for ourselves, our job is to advocate for all. We talk about in the prophetic tradition that the Prophet was sent rahmatan lil alameen alayhi salam. You know, alameen, there's no asterisks, all these don't apply. When we talk about the struggle for justice, that our prophets were all sent to uphold justice, it's for everyone. And we tend to communally think that we are the oppressed community. While we're not going to play oppression Olympics, we are not the most oppressed community by any extent of the imagination. And so if we want to understand the mantra of our oppression, it's tied to a deeper form of systemic injustice. And the reason why I say this is, you know, we talk about discrimination against Muslims in housing. We have a fundamentally, at least in places like where I come from on the East Coast, a fundamentally corrupt system tied to systemic injustice of black and brown people that are marginalized from every aspect of political, social engagement, even in home ownership and in rentier areas. We talk about places like California where wealth is. I want to talk about the great theft of what happens to African Americans over time in a systemic way, in ways that we as Muslims, or let's say Arab or immigrant communities, deny and erase. So in places in California, California has the most golf courses. Technically, those are public lands. Public lands are for all. Golf courses are for the wealthy, right? And so we talk about the great theft of public lands from minority communities. Most of the wealthiest territory where golf courses exist in California belonged to African Americans. And so the theft is not just in their land, but in the fact that because they're public lands, people don't pay taxes on them. And who's taxed the most in those areas? Minority communities. Let's go to Washington, D.C., and what happened in housing in Washington, D.C. Who are the most marginalized groups right outside the White House? It's the African American community. And how, you know, we talk about Georgetown as the most expensive place to live. All of those homes, those beautiful homes, there's squares with a house and a door and a window, those were actually built for freed slaves. And they were sold the promise of sell those houses very cheaply and move into the new promised land, the community called the projects, where you will be in an encampment and under your building is everything you need to store. And so sell cheaply and get out. And that is the great multiple level theft of a community that if we don't understand their oppression, we are kidding ourselves if we understand our oppression. And if we don't actively act for understanding the systemic injustice in many aspects of these communities, then we're kidding ourselves if we're going to talk about systemic injustice against Muslims, right? We can't just erase the surface without understanding the roots. And that is why I really believe that one of the problems of talking about Islamophobia and anti-Islamophobic activity is we don't understand that it's much deeper, and sometimes we are the canary in the coal mine to oppress and continue to oppress African Americans in this country.
Siraj Wahhaj, the question is, how do you balance Islamic duties with activism? So we see both sides where folks are ignoring religious duties as they are being socially active, and also vice versa, where folks are striving religiously but also abandoning activism.
Brothers and sisters, let us remember who we are. We're slaves of Allah. And therefore what we do is based on the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. I'll be honest with you, when I first opened up our masjid in I think 1982, 83, something like that, our masjid was extremely active and all of those social issues. We used to march when other people marched, and we would be with them. But you know, you do have to be balanced. It's not easy to get engaged in everything, and this is why I love Nihad, I love CARE, I love MAS-ICNA, all of them, Muna, MAN, all of them. But CARE, more people I send to CARE than anyone else. There's so many cases. There was a case Nihad, see if you remember, a woman, her name was Stephanie Lewis, a case that CARE took. Now, I knew Stephanie BC. Anybody know what BC is? Before CARE. And I had to do all that work by myself. You don't know that. I gave her shahada. I went to her job. I wrote a letter for her. But when CARE took over, I passed the baton. These are the people who do what they do, and they do a magnificent job. I'm saying to you, you cannot go to a CARE banquet and not give them money. You see, because we're talking about at this conference, the challenges and the investment. You must invest in CARE, in MAS, in ICNA, in MUNA, in MANA, in all of them. That's what this is all about. You can't just walk away from this conference the same way you walked in. We got to be committed, and we got to work, and we got to support those who are doing the work.